All right, final attempt on my lunch because I'm getting hungry. I love this. I really do. Okay, so it's all about control layers and where things start and where things stop. We don't live in a world of infinite budgets, so let's find a way. You can get in there, move in, have the energy efficiency today, and then as you have more time, money, you do the next kind of steps without pulling a bunch of stuff apart and causing a bunch of damage. So, like the brick house design build Instagram page, I like the interior of the window. Get your 3M flashing tape. I still think backer rod. The only thing I don't know is if there's some caulking in here, which is going to be, for me, it's big stretch on the interior, Lexel on the exterior. Your next kind of like critical points, you have your existing tape right now. When you put in your casing, which I love casing, it should be taller than your flange. So if you ever need to service this window or replace it, you can pull the casing without having to cut the siding, which is probably why your installer cut such a large amount of your siding out right now, is he anticipated going back with a casing. If you can, right now, pull that existing siding out and try to tuck some flashing in there. I wouldn't be too worried about it at this stage though, because you got your overhang, you're a single story home. If it was a 2-story home where there's a big gap between the overhang and there, I'd be more concerned about it. And also, it's kind of, since you're going to be putting new sheathing siding on down the road, right now I don't know if this is hyper important. The other thing I didn't draw on here is your drywall. Latex paints. You're in California. They have the no VOCs out there, a lot of latex, a lot of waterborne cleanup, but that latex paint is going to prevent this from turning into a moisture barrier, and you don't want it there. If you were in a cold dominated climate like growing up in Wisconsin, it would be back here, but we're not. I'm in Austin, you're in the Bay Area, so we want it out here. When you put on your new sheathing, put on your header flashing, put on your base flashing, you got your window buck, you have your existing tape right here. When you run this, you want to get it as close as you can to tuck in behind this flange if possible, because that's where you're going to allow a path for water to get out. If you have to, run it below the flange, and I got my cap. Hopefully auto tracking's not on. All right. If you have to, Lexel, just Lexel that thing, stick it on there, put your screws into your studs, because then that water's going to come down, hit this, come out. Same thing up here, Lexel, just glob it up. If you can extend this tape in a proper shingled fashion and there's enough header left to stick it to, that's great. but you still just Lexel, just go to town. $10 a tube, buy a couple cases of it. It's worth its weight in gold. And then, you know, there we go. Because then we're properly shingled, and everything comes out, and it goes like this. This air gap and this air gap are going to be your critical joints. This is just kind of a expanded view. And then up here, again, just proper shingling, you're going to run it down. You're flashing all your tapes and everything. Back here are going to be higher than up here. Market dependent, price point dependent, everything. With the new sheathing, Zip has its own integrated air water barrier. You know, Matt Reisinger does the Zip 2.0, pioneered that. You know, we have the local company, not local, but to Texas, I believe. Proseco, they do a fluid applied, which is great when you're trying to detail stuff like this. It's not great if you don't check your wet mill thickness. You know, you got to sit there and like wet mill gauge it the whole time and make sure you're applying it at the proper thicknesses. I've had this with Redgar shower systems. You have to pay attention to the details on it. I think it's better though. Like Redguard and Proseco, if you pay attention to the proper primers, details, thicknesses, that stuff sticks to everything. You ever try to pull it off, you're whipping plywood. Same thing with the Zip. Like that tape, you're just whipping stuff apart. You're just destroying it. There's no reusing it. Which is why I'm suggesting you wait until you do your sheeting to do everything else. Right now, backer rod, 3M tape, casing. I'd go with a quality caulking. Something like a DAP or a DuPont. You know, you can step up to the, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, I just had it. Max Flex or something like that. When you do your casings, you just don't want to go so high end it doesn't come off. That's the issue with Lexel. Big stretch will come off. I wouldn't push it. So that's gonna there. If you go with the HydroGap SA where it already has its rain screen, you can just pop the siding right on top of it without going with an additional rain screen. You know, again, you're gonna wanna make sure you kind of get it over the top of the sheathing, because I think this is gonna be a real critical gap. There's also, all these details are going to matter. There's also smart barriers and smart membranes now. Out now, there's one by the name of Membrane. Like a membrane, but brain is spelled like your physical human brain. They allow any moisture that gets, not any, but they allow moisture to exit, but they don't, air and moisture, they don't allow it to come in. Market dependent, cost dependent. The critical things I think you have right now that you could take care of that are not going to come out are that your windows, all this fasteners on your flange, Lexel up top here. I would go just over the flange. There's that little joint where the flange meets the tape. Up top, Lexel down the sides. When you get to the bottom, just barely underneath, leaving the bottom open. So that way any of the moisture that inevitably gets in there, again, has its path out. Which is why when you do the sheathing down here, I really suggest this additional sill plate flashing. A lot of people say it's optional, and I think it really comes down to like the way you're detailing it, what you're doing, how this all went together. But traditionally, this sheathing would be behind the window, and we would have tucked this taping over the sheathing. So what you're trying to do is build this out without creating, you know, flat spots, gaps. End grain's gonna suck all that water up. Again, depending on the sheathing, you know, zip, you can tape it with Prosico and the Hydro Gap SA. I would almost want to cut, like bevel this edge under the windows, because you know everywhere else on the house it's going to be top to bottom. I would almost want to bevel this just to give that additional insurance of, if anything was to sneak behind this. My hand's in the way. Let me zoom in. Zoomy zooms. Focus, focus, focus. If anything did, because you're going to want to get this flashing in here, but you're only going to be able to get it as high as your window flange. If anything happened to sneak behind there, you know, Lexel, the bejesus out of that, stick it on there, you would want this bevel, you know, like 5 degrees, just barely tip a table saw blade, just to give it a little bit more insurance. I mean, if water gets behind there, it's going to jack up your sheathing anyway. So whatever sheathing you use when you make this cut, just protect this top bit. You know, put something on there so that end grain doesn't suck up the water and swell. But there's the detail I could think of, and not just because I thought of it, and probably a little bit of that too, I think it's great. Like, you have a situation where you're not holding water anywhere, you're allowing water to escape out here, you're letting it out, depending on what you do up here and what you do around your window flange, you're keeping it out. You also have this 3M tape up here that's helping keep it out with the backer rod all the way around and this escape path. I think if anything was to get back here, it would dry. It'll buy you a lot of time. I generally worry about moisture sandwiches, but because there's this escape path and a secondary path, just in case there is a failure, I think it's great. I would also send this to local contractors. This is one much shorter video, and I'm really curious what they have to say. I'm really curious what you're gonna do. You know, I know you have your attic barrier up here. Same thing up here if you can. You know, tuck it best you can. If you can't, you know, if you can tuck it before you do the sheathing and tie it in, great. If not, I don't think it's the end of the world, because that's why houses have overhangs. You know, this point, you'd have to have some real Forrest Gump, I think it was raining up situations for water to get up there.